as a portion to each tzaddik, every righteous person, Shlosh Meos, 310 worlds, Shenamar lahanchil ohava yesh v'otzrosei amole, that Hashem says that He's going to fill their treasure houses with yesh being the numeric number of 310, and then all of the Shishas Mishnah ends with the following. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta says, Lo matza HaKadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik bracha liYisrael. Hashem did not find a kli, a vessel, that was machzik bracha, that held blessing for the Jewish people, ella hashalom. Rather, shalom. If there is one word to describe Rabbi Marcus, it was an ish hashalom, a man who always wanted peace. And the truth is, since Rabbi Marcus passed away, I've been able to use it as an excuse. When somebody wanted me to go one way or the other way, I said, Rabbi Marcus would want shalom. That's who he was. And yet at the same time, the pasuk that's quoted is Shenamar, Hashem oz le'amo yitain. Hashem gives strength to His people. Hashem yivarech hasamo b'shalom. Hashem blesses His people with shalom, with peace. There are those who want to have shalom but are forceful in order to get it. And there are those who aspire to shalom and attain shalom by the respect that they command without ever raising their voice or without forcing themselves on others. But they do so with grace and with beauty. And that was Rabbi Marcus. Salik Maseches Uktzim. Rabbi Sherbat.
Hadron alach seret taharot v'hadrach alan v'shisa sidrei mishnah v'hadrach alan datan alach seder taharot v'sidrei mishnah v'datach alan la nitshne minach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'la titshne minan la ba'alma adem v'la ba'alma da'ate. Hadron alach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'hadrach alan datan alach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'datach alan la nitshne minach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'la titshne minan la ba'alma adem v'la ba'alma da'ate. Hadrach alach mesechet taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'hadrach alan datan alach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'datach alan lo titshne minach seder taharot v'shisha sidrei mishnah v'la titshne minan la ba'alma adem v'la ba'alma da'ate. Hariv na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei toratcha b'finu v'yot amecha beit Yisrael v'niyeh kulanu anachnu v'tzetzeinu v'tzetzeinu v'tzetzei amecha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei toratecha lishma me'ohavaytecha k'meini mimitzvotecha ki la'olam hili yihi libi tamim b'chukecha leman lo evosh לעולם לא אשכח פיקודיך כי בם חייתני ברוך אתה אדוני למדני חוקיך אמן 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 סלע ועד. מודה אני לפניך אדוני עלינו לאבותינו ששמת חלקנו מיושבי בית המדרש ולא מיושבי קרנות שאנו משכימים והם משכימים אנו משכימים לדברי תורה והם משכימים לדברים בטלים אנו עמלים והם עמלים אנו עמלים ומקבל שכר והם עמלים ואינם מקבלים שכר אנו רצים והם רצים אנו רצים לבאר שחת ואנו רצים לחיי העולם הבא. שנאמר, ואתה אלוהים תורידם לבאר שחת, אנשי דמים מרומה לא יחצו ימיהם ואני אפתח בך. יוצא לפניך אדוני אלינו לאבותינו. כשם שעזרתנו לסיים סדר זרעים ושישה סדרי משנה, כך תעזרנו להתקיל ספרים אחרים ולסיימם. ללמוד וללמד מתוך הרחבה, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. וזכות כל התנאים ותלמידי חכמים הנזכרים בסתר זרעים ושישה סדרי משנה וכל הספרים שלמדנו יעמוד לנו ולזרענו ולזרע זרענו שלא תמוש התורה הקדושה מפינו מפי זרענו וזרע זרענו מעתה ועד עולם וקיים בנו מקרא שכתוב בהלכך תנחה אותך בשוכבך תשמור עליך והקיצות היא תשיחך כי בי ירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים אורך ימים בימינה אושר ובכלו בשמאלה אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו ושלום.
Yiskadeh Yiskadeh Shemei Rabba B'Yom Hu Asid Yiskadeto Lachaya Mesayo Lasaki Lachai Alma L'Midnei Karta D'Yerushalayim U'L'Shachlel Hichalei B'Gavo L'Me'akar Pulchana Nuchra Me'ara V'la Sava Pulchana D'Shmaya L'Astre V'Yamlichut Shabrichub Malchusevi Karei V'Chayechonu V'Yamechonu V'Chayedcho Beis Yisrael B'Agalav Isman Kari V'Imru Amen V'Hei Shemei Rabba Mebarach V'Olam L'Meo Maya Yisbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yispar V'Yisramam V'Yisnasei Yisadar v'Yisalev v'Yisalal Shmei Kudsha B'Richu Li'ela Mikol B'Chasa V'Shirasa Tushb'Chasa V'Nechamasa Damiram B'Yoma V'Imru Amen Al Yisrael V'Rabban Amiyal T'Midiyam V'Yalkol T'Midiyam S'Midiyam V'Yalkol Madiyal Skim B'Yorai Sodi V'Asar Adain V'Yichol Asar V'Asar Yehei L'Hana L'Chan Shlomar Rabachina V'Chista V'Rachamim V'Chayin Arichinim Zner V'Chev V'Kanam Mikadam V'Handi V'Shmaya V'Arabi V'Imru Amen Eish L'Mar Rabba V'Shmaya V'Chaim Tovim Aleinu V'Yalkol Yisrael V'Imru Amen Oseh Shalom Imrama Hu B'Rachama V'Oseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yalkol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. We'd now like to introduce Rabbi Marcus's and Rebbetzin Marcus's granddaughter, Mrs. Schiffer Rabenstein, who was a well-known lecturer and in our shul many of times a scholar in residence, and it's always a special treat for us to be able to hear her, and there was tremendous pride that Rabbi Marcus and Rebbetzin Marcus have in hearing her, and we get to hear her tonight.
Good evening. A special thank you to the coordinators of tonight, which I believe is really an extension of the kavod that was always granted to my grandparents. I think this is the attention to detail that went into tonight's program is really just another example of it. One of the volumes of thoughts of Rav Soloveitchik that was printed posthumously is a volume entitled Family Redeemed. It is a fascinating collection of essays on assorted topics relating to family dynamics and relationships, parents and children, husbands and wives, etc. Now, among other things, it deals with the distinction between paternal and maternal roles in parenting. Rav Soloveitchik explains that the father's role in teaching is basically of an intellectual nature. It is to teach a system of thought. It is to transmit a hierarchy of values. It is to inspire the acquisition of knowledge. But says Rav Soloveitchik, Judaism is not only an intellectual experience. It is not only an intellectual tradition, rather. It is an experiential one. The Jew does not only observe Shabbos. The Jew does not only observe Yom Tov. The Jew experiences Shabbos and experiences Yom Tov. There is beauty and warmth in Judaism. And it is impossible to provide all of that merely with formal training. Experiences are not communicated through words, per se. Experiences are communicated through contact, through a smile, through a tear, through association, by osmosis, through soft melody, and silent prayer. Says Rav Soloveitchik, it is generally the mother who communicates what he calls the heartbeat of Judaism. I believe it can be said that for a child, one's grandparents very much maintain that role. It is not so much the word or the knowledge or the instruction that is imparted from grandparent to grandchild, but it is the experience that leaves its mark. It's the warmth, the song, the contact. And when it's done right, it communicates what I would call the heartbeat of Judaism. My mind is absent many of the details of the interactions that I had with my grandfather over the many years that I was zocha to have a grandfather. In most cases, I don't remember the exact words per se, but I do remember the experience. And I believe that my life and my connection to Judaism were enhanced and enriched by those experiences, some of which I'd like to share with you this evening. I spent a lot of time in my grandparents' house growing up. What I remember most from that Shabbos table are four things. The first is the brachos that my grandfather gave on Friday night. For whatever reason, my father did not carry on that custom. And so my grandparents' house was the only place I went where I got a bracha on Friday night. And there is something intangible about the experience of having your grandfather put his hands on your head and give you the bracha that has been our tradition for generations. Whisper a bracha to you and kiss your kepi. And in that moment, you feel and you absorb not so much the words, but the energy of our Masorah. Generations of Jews wanting their children and grandchildren to grow up with the role models of our forefathers and our foremothers, wanting that should be who they want to become. The second of what I remember most from all of those Shabbosos are the Zmiros that my grandfather sang at the table. There are certain tunes that, to this day, when I hear them or when I sing them, I am transported to my grandfather's Shabbos table. And it may not be the tunes that are traditionally sung today, even in my house, most commonly, but it is a tune that takes me back. My third memory of my grandparents' Shabbos table, specifically of my grandfather, was after the meal. After the meal on Friday night, my grandfather would sit in his seat at the head of the table. Some of this was alluded to at the Levaya. He would sit in his seat at the head of the table, always with a cup of hot water and lemon. And he would open up Sfarim, piles of Sfarim in front of him, probably preparing his drasha. When I woke up Shabbos morning, and certainly when I was younger, that was at a pretty early hour, my grandfather was in the same position, sitting at the head of the table with a cup of hot water, with piles of Sfarim open in front of him. I remember wondering as a young child if my grandfather ever went to sleep. I never asked him the details of what he was learning. But the image, to me, is a centerpiece of all of my memories, because it left me with a feeling that my grandfather was a person surrounded by Torah. And so much of who he was as a person was because he was a worked-on person, because he was a person who absorbed the values of Torah, of the Torah that he learned and that he taught. And it was through that process that he became the person that he was. He communicated the heartbeats of Judaism in that experience. And the fourth primary memory that I have of sitting at my grandfather's Shabbos table is the conversation. I don't recall the details of almost any of our conversations. I don't recall the specifics of the back and forth, but I do recall that he would almost always ask me about what I was learning in school. Specifically, he wanted to know what I was learning in Chumash and what I was learning in Parsha, and if I had something to share. When I spent a year of study in Israel, which turned into a year and a half, my grandparents came to visit me a number of times. I remember my friends would say, "Your grandparents are coming again?" The fact that my grandmother used to wrap Snapple bottles into her suitcase because I liked Snapple is not the subject of this talk. But I did have the tremendous opportunity to spend many Shabbosos in the dining room of the Imbal Hotel with my grandparents. I don't recall the details of many of those conversations, but I do recall my grandfather's deep interest in what I was learning and how I was processing it, and what that experience in Israel was like for me. I do remember that that was important to him. And I don't think it was anything in particular that he said, but somehow he managed to communicate that it was a deep nachas for him to have a granddaughter interested in study of Torah in the land of Israel. And that leaves an impression on a grandchild, a very deep impression. Because it's not what is communicated so much through words, but what is communicated through experience that leaves you with the heartbeat of Judaism. When I spent my first summer in Israel on the Mechlelet and CSY summer program, first after 10th grade, then after 11th grade, I overlapped with my grandparents who always spent time in Israel in the summers. And I was just at that time venturing into the world of Sfarim. I was on fire with a passion for learning. I had been exposed to Torah study in a new way, and I wanted to accumulate my own library of sorts. And I remember Sfarim shopping with my grandfather in Israel. I remember, I'll just say parenthetically, he specifically took me to the Sfarim store in the Old City, the Mariah bookstore, which is now really more of a Judaica store than it is a Sfarim store, but at that time it was really more of a Sfarim store. And I remember, smart aleck as I was, I said, I think it's really less expensive in Mea Shearim. And my grandfather said to me, yes, it is. But who's going to support the stores in the Old City if not us? And don't we want there to be Sfarim stores in the Old City? I'll pay the difference. And in that, he also taught me a lesson. But I remember shopping in that store with him, and him pointing out to me sets of Sfarim that I had never heard of before, that now hold primary place on my shelves, encouraging me to buy this or that to broaden my library. But most of what I remember is not even the specific sets of Sfarim that he pointed out for me to buy. Most of what I remember is the experience of looking for Sfarim with my grandfather in the Old City of Jerusalem. Because it's not really what he said. It's what he communicated by osmosis. It was the feeling that I had that my grandfather was proud and excited by my new pursuit. And how special I felt to be sharing the experience of Torah growth with him. And what kind of an impression that experience leaves on a grandchild. When I think back to my periods of growth in Israel, I think I was really in the midst of a journey. And I'm sure my grandfather, in hindsight, I'm sure my grandfather had many opinions to direct me in one way or another. And I'm sure he had a lot to say. But mostly my grandfather just listened. Here or there he would redirect or ask a question to probe me, to make me think deeper. But mostly he just listened. And so much of chinuch, I realize, is not just in what we say, but in how we listen. My grandmother often says that the shul is their extended family, and that is absolutely the way my grandparents lived their lives. But for me, there was a real distinction, because in the earlier years of my childhood, my grandfather was my grandfather. It took me a while to realize the giant of the person he was, and that this person who let me sit in his seat up there, and I remember playing with the little lost and found items that he had in the crevice of the rack by his seat, that person who abandoned his seat to go up was the rabbi, and all that meant. That the man who used to eat jellyfish and pretend for us that his teeth were getting stuck together was making a tremendous difference in the lives of so many people in the world. My grandfather would just come in and out. I don't think my grandparents' screen door does this anymore, but it used to make a loud banging sound when he walked in. That was always the sound that my grandfather was ushering in, and he was always moving quickly when he walked through the door, running from one thing to another. I had the experience, the very unfortunate experience, the very painful experience, the Sunday after the Sunday after Shiva ended. A 10th and 12th grader in our school lost a parent. And that morning, I attended a very painful levaya. And that afternoon was the wedding of a very close student of mine, a student I've been close to for many years. And I felt myself needing to compartmentalize, to put one set of emotions in a box and open another. And I thought to myself, I suppose much of my grandfather's day followed this kind of a pattern, where he listened to one person's problem and then danced at someone else's party, and then came home and acted like nothing was going on. The Shabbos after my grandfather passed away, I went to make a cup of tea after the meal on Friday night, because I guess I inherited that desire to sit with a hot drink after the meal. And I took upon myself a number of years ago to try to not use tea bags on Friday night, on Shabbos. It's a dispute in halacha, or Moshe Feinstein supports it, and other poskim are uncomfortable with it, and I decided it's not such a big deal for me. This is something I can do. So I usually make my tea on Friday night either with tea powder or with concentrated tea that my daughter makes. But that Friday night, which was the first Friday night, the Friday night during Shiva, the first Friday night after my grandfather passed away, it was the first time since I adopted this no tea bag behavior that I had no tea powder, and my daughter was not home and had not made tea concentrate. And I remembered, my grandfather used to just have hot water and lemon. Maybe I should try that. So I sat down with my hot water and lemon. It didn't go as easily for me. I needed a little honey with it. And I thought to myself, I wonder if my grandfather just didn't want to use tea bags on Shabbos. So that Sunday, we came back up to New Jersey, and I asked my grandmother, did Grampy like tea? She said, yeah, he liked tea, but he didn't usually drink tea. Why are you asking? So I told her this story, and I said I was just wondering if he used tea bags on Shabbos. She said, oh, he would never use tea bags on Shabbos. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many other pieces we just don't know and may never discover that he in personal practice took upon himself in deep sensitivity to other people and in deep sensitivity to the wants of Hashem. We may never know. But we do know the feeling of having been in his presence. We take with us the warmth of that experience. We know that smile. We know that melody. And my hope and my prayer is that our relationships, both bein Adam l'chaveira with each other and bein Adam l'makom with Hashem, will be enhanced by the memories and by the nature of those experiences. Ashreinu, how fortunate are we to have known and engaged such a giant of a person. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I just want to recognize the hard work of Larry Ryan and Naomi Berg in making this night and putting everything all together. And our next speaker is one of the grandsons, Joseph Marcus.
When I was a young boy, every night my father used to tuck me into bed, and he would sing me a song, read me a book, and tell me a story. And almost every story that he told me every night was about my grandfather and things he's done when they grew up in Buffalo for the community. And as a kid, I always kind of thought, all right, my grandfather made this impact on my dad, and he's telling me a story about him every night. And I got a little older, and I kind of came to realize it wasn't just my father that had these stories about him. It was everyone that met him had these stories and how he affected so many people and all the things that he did for the community. And it's very rare that one person can affect so many different people, that just one person can mean so much to so many people. But he wasn't just one person. He had my grandmother with him, who was with him every day and helped him become the person that he was. And no obstacle was too hard for my grandmother to handle. Even when things got really hard, my grandmother was always there, in good spirits. And if you know my grandmother, one of the things she always says is, "It is what it is." And I love that because it's so true. It is what it is. And that's a great way of looking at things and looking at life and dealing with things that are sometimes not easy to deal with. So as I remember my grandfather and all the amazing things he's done for the community and all the stories I hear, I always think of my grandmother as well and everything that she's done to sacrifice for the community as well. So thank you everyone for listening, and it's something I just wanted to say. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize the presence of distinguished colleague Rabbi Mendel Solomon, who's here. I believe I saw Rabbi Klar as well. I think one of the great moments of nachas for Rabbi Marcus was being able to spend time with the children of the shul and to watch those children grow. And it was a special treat in seeing a number of those children grow into becoming rabbis and leaders of our community. And one of those children who grew up in our shul had a very close relationship with Rabbi Marcus, has had a distinguished career that has brought him back to the United States, to a warmer climate. And as someone who forever calls West Orange home, even though he now is the rabbi of Congregation Rinat Yisrael in Teaneck, Rabbi Chaim Strachler.
It's nice to be home. It's nice to be able to speak from this spot. And I'd like to acknowledge each of you who I very much feel are sharing with me the feeling that even though we're home right now, that we're missing someone very dear to what makes this our home. But as Rabbi Zwickler mentioned, this is the end of the Shloshim. And while there certainly is a transition as far as mourning is concerned, the sadness continues. But I'd also like to put a finger on something else that happens today as we experience the Shloshim. And that is that we also make a transition from thinking about what it is that we have lost to thinking about what it is that we had and continue to have. I'll tell a story. I was in Toronto. It was early in my experience as a Rav of Sharei Shamayim. I was walking into the building, and I saw a lollipop stick on the floor. So being of this home, of this community, what do you do when you're in shul and you see a lollipop stick on the floor? You pick it up. One of my balabatim in Toronto saw me do this and said, wow, that's level 5 leadership. So I've learned a lot of Torah, but level 5 leadership I had to look up. This is something from a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And I'd like to just read to you a little bit of what this concept is. And I want to ask you, what comes to your mind when you hear these words? Collins found that level 5 leaders have humility, and they don't seek success for their own glory. Rather, success is necessary so that the team and organization can thrive. They share credit for success, and they're the first to accept blame for mistakes. Collins also says that they're often shy, but fearless when it comes to making decisions, especially ones that most other people consider risky. Who do you think about when you hear those words? I feel such great honor as being a representative of the children who were formed by Rabbi Marcus in terms of what it is that we conceive as what a rabbi is. Ashreinu, as we just heard, Ashreinu. To be able to grow up within these walls, to be able to meet with Rabbi Marcus before my bar mitzvah, and to watch him listen, to watch him lead. For all the smiles, I'll tell you stories about Musar too. As a boy, I remember that Shabbos when Rabbi Marcus said that an Eruv is not to be used for large sporting events. And he threatened us as boys and girls that he would take down his Eruv if those games did not stop. That too was also an example to me of what a rabbi is. A loving hand, but a deep appreciation for what halacha, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of us. I remember an experience, my first time in Israel. In the summer, I was 12 years old. And I remember walking and meeting with Rabbi Marcus in Maryland, in Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Marcus insisting upon taking me and my father to the Kotel on Tisha B'Av night. And walking through the shuk with Rabbi Marcus as he guided us through to be able to walk to the Kotel in those moments. I am sure that there are many, many stories that you can tell, that each person sitting here can tell, of how much of their Judaism is reflected in the character of this Gadol who we mourn. I'd like to close with thinking a little bit about what it is that we hold and have, what it is, the legacy that we carry as a West Orange community, but also as Jews more generally. There's been discussion out there in big America about what a Jew is, what Judaism is lately. Are we a race? Are we a nation? Are we a religion? And obviously, we are all of the above. My friend Yair Rosenberg wrote for The Atlantic, I think it was yesterday evening, that for him, the word that best communicates what is not communicable is that we are a family. That is something that we heard from all the Marcus children and grandchildren when they spoke about how their father and grandfather saw this community. And it's a value that we can carry with us everywhere that we go. When we think about what it is to be a Jew, to be able to see what unites us, to see what is able to give one another strength and courage and hope during hard times. Rabbi Zwickler mentioned the closing phrase from the Mishnah. Shalom. This idea that what it is that we carry with us is a Torah of shalom, of peace. And this is also something that we say every Friday night when we speak about what it is that Talmidei Chachamim do. Their marbim shalom. And I'd like to quote to you from the Ben Ish Chai in his Perush, the Ben Yoyada, in which he speaks about quoting his own son about this idea. And he says that it is specifically when our Chachamim see themselves as Talmidim, see themselves as people who are always seeking out to learn, to grow, to have a certain attitude about what is going on around us in our world, that then they are truly then able to create shalom, to create peace. When I think about the legacy and the example of what it means to be a rabbi, I think about this attribute of pursuing shalom, of seeking out a Torah that is always asking us to grow, always asking us to seek, always seeking out the opportunities to be a force for good within our world. And that's a legacy that does not end here at the Shloshim. It's something that we are able to carry forward, each of us, and how it is that we live as rabbis, as we see rabbis, as we live as Jews, as we see Jews. Ashreinu.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Strachler, for your beautiful words. Rabbi Strachler represented the children of the shul who grew up with Rabbi Marcus as a rabbi. Assistant rabbis play a vital role in the caring for a shul, but assistant rabbis to Rabbi Marcus were incredible students, watching a master at work. And I was told when I first came to the shul that this shul takes great pride in where their assistant rabbis end up going and who they end up becoming. I guess I missed the note because I never left. But one of the legends that I was told about was Rabbi Donnie Cohen. We heard from Rabbi Daniel Alter at the Levaya, and Rabbi and Mrs. Cohen were leaving that morning to Eretz Yisrael for another one of their children's weddings. Should be with Mazel and Bracha. And while they were there, I think another daughter got engaged. Am I correct, Rabbi Cohen? Should be with Mazel. And I know that Rabbi Cohen had a very special relationship with Rabbi Marcus, and he continues to bring pride to our community, to Rebbetzin Marcus, to the legacy of Rabbi Marcus by being the leader that he is of the largest shul, Orthodox shul in Stamford, Connecticut, but in Connecticut altogether. And he is someone who is truly respected and admired by his peers. It's my honor to ask Rabbi Donnie Cohen to share a few words.
You forgot to mention that most assistant rabbis had to have the name Daniel to be here too. Thank you very much for inviting me to share a few words of tribute tonight in memory of Rabbi Marcus. Diane and I wish so much comfort to you, Marilyn, your family, and the community. Rabbi Marcus made an indelible impact on my life and the life of our family, and we're forever grateful for his friendship, his wisdom, his trust, his patience, and love. I had the honor of serving as his assistant for the first 4 years of my rabbinic career. When asked what I learned most from him, I'll answer with a brief story. Judaism teaches us that in any given moment, there are 36 righteous people who sustain the world. They walk with modesty, in anonymity, and with a deep commitment to serving others. The Israeli novelist Chaim Ber shared that when he was 9 years old, he had a conversation with the tzaddik of Jerusalem, Rabbi Aryeh Levine, that changed his life. He asked Rabbi Levine whether he was one of the 36 righteous people that sustain the world. Rabbi Levine paused for a moment and answered the following: Lif'amim, sometimes, bishvil kama dakot, for a few minutes, v'gam ata yachal lihiot, and you can be one of them too. Those words ignited Chaim for life, and Rabbi Marcus ignited that belief in me too. I felt inspired and empowered with the realization that we are not responsible to change the world, but we possess the power and the sacred task to change the world of one person. We can be one of those 36 righteous people, even if just for a few moments every day. Rabbi Marcus believed that God is in the details. Every human being is created in God's image. And the most important role of a rabbi is as a conduit of kindness. My mind is flooded with so many memories. As Rabbi Marcus's assistant, even the most mundane tasks could be holy. From ordering paper goods from Presser to overseeing the shul construction, which he tasked me with one summer. I'll never forget Rabbi Marcus telling me, "Donnie, you're in charge," as he left the trailer office to go to Israel for the summer. I have memories of riding in his car and pulling out nails and a hammer on a late Friday afternoon to fix the Eruv board on Route 10. I am forever grateful for his giving me the latitude to discover my calling for outreach. He kept me by his side for meetings on conversions, kashrut, the board of rabbis, and so much more. He looked after me like a son. And I'll always remember his kindness when we went to the hospital before Sarah Malka was born, and he brought us food for Shabbos. The world is diminished with his passing, but so much brighter because of his life and everyone he inspired. He ignited something inside of me that grows every day. He embodied a beautiful idea of the Kutzker Rebbe, who explained that we should view giving ourselves to God and our community as one flame lighting another. We are not diminished in any way. Giving to another human being and to God is not a zero-sum game, but rather an opportunity to spread more light in the world, and we all burn even brighter. Rabbi Marcus, I miss you, and we all miss you. Know that you will live in us and through us every day, and that your memory will be a blessing and inspiration always.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. One of my greatest honors over the last 19 years was to take Rabbi and Mrs. Marcus to simchas in the community. And we would drive all over. And it was a very special time that I had with the Rabbi and Mrs. Marcus. But there was one thing that became clear, and that was Marilyn had the final word. You gonna forgive me? I figured, how am I gonna introduce you? This is the only... I'm waiting till she's... I hope she's still talking to me. You're shaking your head. Okay. No, not yet. I didn't finish. You always get the final word. Without further ado.
You know, I really don't want to speak. I only want to thank everyone. I want to thank this community, the community that my husband loved. I cannot tell you, these past 4 weeks, the outpouring, the love, the joy, the outpouring from every single person, phone calls, letters, cards, contributions, people I don't even know people have called me and said, I'm so-and-so. Your husband did this. Your husband did this. He was the most wonderful human being. I've always said, to me, to my family, he was the most incredible human being ever to walk this earth. My sister was so enamored with him the first time she met him. She said, "Man, he's God's gift to mankind." And he remained that way to my entire family until the day he left this world. This community, I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for your love, the joy that you have given me, the comfort you have given me in these past few weeks. I mean, I loved the community before. I cannot believe the manner in which you've come and you've helped me. So thank you again. May we all celebrate many, many happy occasions together. And again, my love to all of you. Thank you.